I want to tell you something that changed my life. Not all at once, but slowly, like how dawn creeps in before you even realize the sky isn't dark anymore. It started the day I realized I wasn't who I thought I was. You ever feel that? Like you're playing a version of yourself, smiling when you're hurting, saying you're fine when inside it feels like a storm's brewing. I was good at that, wearing masks, being agreeable, quieting the parts of me that didn't fit. I didn't even know I was doing it. It just felt like surviving. But then, out of nowhere, someone said something that cracked me wide open. They said, "What you reject in others is often what you've rejected in yourself." I laughed it off at first, defensively, but the words stuck, like a splinter under the skin. And when I started really thinking about it, I realized how much of me was hiding in the dark corners of my own mind. It was Carl Jung who called it the shadow. Those parts of us we don't want to admit exist. The selfishness, the jealousy, the rage, but not just the bad stuff. Also, the strength we were told was too much. The dreams we buried, the voice we silenced. All of it pushed away. And the scariest part, just because we deny it doesn't mean it disappears. It lives on, shaping what we say, how we treat people, who we choose to love or avoid, how we react when we feel threatened. The shadow doesn't die. It just goes underground and waits until something triggers it. That's what was happening to me, and I didn't even realize it. I thought I was being nice. Turns out I was just terrified of being disliked. I thought I was being humble. Really, I was too afraid to own my worth. Every time I judged someone for being too much, I was secretly rejecting the part of me that longed to be free. It wasn't until I sat alone one evening, truly alone, not scrolling, not numbing, not running, that I felt it. This low hum in my chest, a sadness that had no name. I realized I hadn't really looked at myself in years, not deeply. I was always editing, adjusting, performing. I didn't even know who I was without the mask, and that terrified me, but it also woke me up. I started paying attention to my projections. When someone annoyed me, I asked, "Why does this bother me so much? What's being mirrored back?" It wasn't easy. I felt raw, exposed, like my defenses had been peeled back. But somewhere in that vulnerability, I found something real. A glimpse of the person I'd buried under all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. I wish I could tell you it was a quick fix, that I read one book, had one epiphany, and boom, healed. But no, it's been messy. I've had to face parts of myself I wanted to pretend didn't exist. The part that wants control, the part that resents, the part that envies, but also the part that dreams, the part that loves fiercely, the part that speaks truth even when her voice shakes. And the most shocking thing, when I stopped running from these pieces, they stopped controlling me. There's this quiet power that comes from owning your whole self, not just the pretty parts, not just the curated story, but the messy, complicated, raw truth of who you are. When you stop pretending, something softens inside. You stop needing others to validate you. You stop demanding perfection from yourself, from others, from life. Instead, you become curious. You become kind, not in a performative way, but in the deepest, most grounded way. Because now you understand everyone's carrying shadows. Everyone's fighting invisible battles. And the more you meet your own darkness with compassion, the more you can meet the world with the same. I'm still walking this path. Some days it feels like I've made progress. Other days I trip over the same old patterns. But now I know I'm not broken. I'm just unfolding, becoming, learning to welcome all of me, even the parts I used to hide. And if any of this resonates with you, then maybe, just maybe, you're waking up too. There's something strange that happens when you begin to see yourself clearly. Like truly see yourself. not through the eyes of who you were told to be or who you pretend to be, but as you actually are. It's terrifying, it's liberating, it strips you down. That was the next stage for me. I thought once I recognized my shadow, those hidden, rejected parts, it would be easy to integrate them. But no, that's when the real battle began. Because knowing something is there doesn't mean you're ready to accept it, and it definitely doesn't mean you're ready to feel it. I started noticing how often I avoided my own discomfort. I'd blame others when I felt insecure. I'd withdraw when I felt exposed. I'd get angry at people for being too much, when deep down I was scared that my own emotions might drown me if I let them surface. You know what I realized? The parts I feared most weren't evil. They were wounded. They were young, raw, confused, like emotional orphans left in the basement of my mind, banging on the door, just asking to be seen. But I was so used to pushing them away that when they showed up, as anxiety, as shame, as defensiveness, I didn't recognize them for what they were. Messengers. Sometimes the pain we carry doesn't want to destroy us. It wants to be held. But holding your shadow, that's hard. It means being honest about your jealousy, your pettiness, your judgment. It means saying, yeah, that's in me too, instead of, I would never do that. And it means staying present, not running, not numbing, not blaming, just staying. That's when I understood why so few people actually do shadow work, because it's not intellectual, it's emotional, it hurts. It asks you to sit in the fire of your own contradictions, to feel them without fixing or escaping. And for someone like me, who was always trying to be the good one, the kind one, the one who held it all together, this was soul surgery. There was one night I'll never forget. I had a dream where I was yelling at someone, screaming, actually. I woke up covered in sweat, heart pounding, and I remember thinking, that couldn't be me. I'm not like that. But of course I was. I just didn't let myself go there in waking life. My dream was revealing the part of me I'd silenced, the part that needed to be heard, even if she wasn't polite about it. That dream cracked me open. I started journaling, not to be poetic, but to be real. Rage, grief, bitterness, longing. I wrote things I'd never admit out loud. It wasn't pretty, but it was true. And somewhere in that honesty, I felt a shift. I wasn't drowning in emotion anymore. I was witnessing it. I was listening. I was learning to let my shadow speak without letting it steer. And the more I did that, the more human I became. Less polished, more real, less performative, more present. I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be whole. That's the difference Jung was pointing to, I think. Not the goal of being flawless, but of being complete. Accepting the contradictions, the complexity, the chaos inside us. The beauty of this work is that it doesn't make you better than others. It makes you softer, more understanding. Because now, when I see someone acting out, I wonder what they've buried. I wonder what shadow is driving them. And instead of judging, I remember my own. There's power in that. Quiet power. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that anchors you, deep in your own truth. And maybe that's the beginning of real peace. Not the absence of darkness, but the courage to face it, in ourselves and in each other. I didn't expect this, but somewhere along the way, things started to feel lighter. Not because life got easier. It didn't. But because I stopped fighting myself all the time. You know that constant internal tug of war between who you think you should be and who you really are? It began to quiet down, not disappear, just soften. And that softness made room for something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. Instead of reacting with shame or defense every time an uncomfortable emotion showed up, I started asking myself questions, not to analyze or fix, but just to understand. What is this anger trying to tell me? What does my envy reveal about what I deeply desire? Why does that person's confidence make me uncomfortable? These questions weren't accusations. They were invitations, gentle ones. And through that curiosity, I began to uncover something unexpected. There were parts of me I had labeled bad or inappropriate that were actually full of life. Like the assertiveness I used to mistake for aggression, it was my ability to say no. Or the part of me that wanted more than I was taught to want. That was my ambition, my hunger to create, to expand. These weren't flaws. They were gifts I'd exiled. I realized the shadow doesn't just hold your pain. It holds your power, too. It's wild how much potential we bury simply because we're afraid of how others will perceive us. And that fear? It usually started early. Maybe someone told you to be quiet when you were expressive. Or that you were selfish when you asked for what you needed. And little by little you learned to shrink, to survive. But surviving isn't the same as living. When I finally let myself feel my own edges, the full spectrum of who I was, something shifted. I started speaking more honestly, even if my voice trembled. I started setting boundaries, even when people didn't understand. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having emotions, for needing rest. And you know what? Not everyone liked it. Some people fell away, others got uncomfortable, but the relationships that remained, they got deeper, more real, more nourishing, because when you stop hiding from yourself, you stop asking others to do it too. Your presence gives them permission to show up fully as well. This is the thing no one tells you about shadow work. It's not just healing, it's liberating. You reclaim the parts of you that were once buried, and suddenly you're not operating at half power anymore. You're not constantly second-guessing, self-editing, or walking on eggshells in your own life. You start to trust yourself, and that trust, it's like coming home. Not to some ideal version of who you wish you were, but to the real, raw, layered person you've always been. The one with wounds and wisdom, mess and magic, fear and fire. The one who's been waiting for your own acceptance. I still have moments when I slip into old patterns, we all do. But now I catch it. I pause, I breathe, I listen, and I ask, what part of me is asking to be seen right now? And usually the answer surprises me, because buried in the shadow again and again is a part of me that just wants to live, to love, to speak, to be held. And the more I let her in, the more alive I feel. I need to tell you about something that hit me harder than anything else in this whole journey, the dreams. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little out there. But when you start doing this deep inner work, your unconscious gets loud. Not in words, but in symbols and stories and images that don't make logical sense, but hit you with an emotional force you can't ignore. That's what happened to me. I had this one dream. I was walking through a mirror, but on the other side, everything was dim, colorless, and strange. I saw people I knew, but their faces were twisted, like they were wearing masks. And then I saw myself. Only it wasn't me. It was the version of me I had spent my life trying not to be. Angry, cold, demanding, harsh. I woke up sweating, my heart racing, but I didn't dismiss it. Not this time. I wrote it down. I sat with it. And slowly, it started to make sense. That figure wasn't my enemy. She was my shadow. She was all the energy I had pushed away, the ugly emotions I'd disowned. She was my truth, wrapped in the pain I'd refused to feel. That was the beginning of a different kind of honesty. Not the performative kind. I'm just being real. But a quiet, soul-level honesty, the kind that humbles you, the kind that strips you of the narratives you've told yourself to survive. And one of the hardest things I had to admit, sometimes I wasn't a victim. Sometimes I was the one who shut people out. Sometimes I used kindness to manipulate, silence to punish, care to control. That truth burned, but it also freed me. Because if I could own the ways I hurt others, even unintentionally, I could stop being ruled by the fear of it. It was like shining a light into a dark room. At first, everything looks messy, chaotic, even scary. But once your eyes adjust, you realize it's not evil. It's just neglected, forgotten, in need of care. That's what shadow work is at its core. Care. Fierce, radical care for the parts of you no one ever taught you to love. I started noticing how my body reacted to certain people. Tension in my shoulders, a clench in my jaw, a pit in my stomach. Those weren't random, they were signals. My shadow communicating through sensation. So I stopped dismissing it. I started listening. And the more I listened, the more connected I felt. Not just to myself, but to others too. Because here's the thing. When you start meeting your own shadow with compassion, you can hold space for others in a way that feels almost sacred. I used to be so judgmental of myself, of other people. But that judgment was just fear in disguise. Fear of seeing in them what I hadn't accepted in me. Now, when someone lashes out or withdraws, I don't immediately take it personally. I wonder what they might be hiding, what pain they're carrying, what part of them is begging to be seen. That doesn't mean I excuse everything. Boundaries still matter, but I've stopped making everything so black and white. People aren't good or bad. We're just complex, contradictory, beautifully broken and trying our best. And when you get that, like really get it, it changes how you live. You become softer in your strength, kinder in your truth, less reactive and more responsive. You stop trying to fix everyone, including yourself. Instead, you witness, you hold, you allow. This shift isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, like a new undertone in your voice, a different rhythm in how you move through the world. But it's real, and it makes you feel grounded, like you've finally stepped into your own skin. I used to think the goal was to fix myself. Now I know it's to hold myself, all of me, with enough love that nothing has to hide anymore. That, to me, is the real awakening. At some point, this personal journey turned into something much bigger. It wasn't just about me anymore, not just about my wounds or my healing. As I kept peeling back the layers, I started to see the ways our shadows intertwine. Not just yours or mine, but everyone's. The shadow of a whole society, a whole culture, a collective that forgets, denies, represses, just like we do, individually. It hit me hard. We grow up in systems that teach us what's acceptable, what's rewarded, what's punished. We internalize those lessons without question. And then one day we wake up and realize we've been breathing in shame for years. Not because we were wrong or broken, but because the world couldn't hold our wholeness. Think about it. How often are we told to be quiet, to be small, to follow the rules even when they don't make sense? How many people are carrying generations of unspoken grief, of historical trauma, of wounds passed down in silence? The more I did this work on myself, the more I started seeing the same patterns in the world around me. The projection, the blame, the fear of other, the addiction to control. It's everywhere, in politics, in media, in relationships, in institutions. We point fingers outward because we're terrified to look inward. That's when I understood something that shook me. Our personal shadows feed the collective shadow. When we don't face our own pain, it leaks into the world. In small ways, like sarcasm or passive aggression, and in terrifying ways, like violence, hatred, oppression. And just like in the individual, when we refuse to look at what we've done, we stay stuck, repeating the same patterns, pretending we've moved on when really, we've just buried the truth deeper. History doesn't repeat itself because we forget. It repeats because we refuse to feel. I started asking myself, What would it mean to truly hold space for the collective shadow? To see beyond good versus evil, right versus wrong, and instead ask, what pain is trying to speak here? Not to justify, never that, but to understand, to take responsibility, to interrupt the cycle, because ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. If anything, silence makes it stronger. So I started listening more, really listening, to people whose pain looked different than mine, to stories I didn't want to believe, to truths that made me uncomfortable. And as I did, I felt this deep ache, not just for them, but for all of us. Because in every war, in every injustice, in every act of cruelty, I saw a reflection of the very shadow I was learning to face in myself. And it changed me. I stopped looking for heroes and villains. I started looking for healing, for accountability, yes, but also for humanity, and that meant starting with my own. Owning the places where I had been silent, where I had benefited, where I had denied. Not with guilt, that's not helpful, but with honesty, with a willingness to be uncomfortable so I could grow. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Shadow work, real shadow work, isn't just about feeling better. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to project their pain onto the world anymore. Someone who can sit with discomfort without needing to control it. Someone who can see the humanity in others without losing their own. And maybe that's how the world changes, not in one sweeping gesture, but one person at a time, one truth at a time. One act of courage to face what's been hidden, not just in the mirror, but in the collective story we all live in. This isn't easy work. It never will be. But I believe with everything in me that it's necessary, because every time we bring light to our own darkness, we make it a little safer for someone else to do the same. And in that way, healing becomes contagious. Not loud, not flashy, just quietly revolutionary. It's strange, how everything we've been taught about strength often turns out to be the opposite of what actually makes us strong. We're told to hold it together, to be unshakable, to rise above. But real strength, the kind that changes you, looks more like sitting with your own pain without flinching, owning your story without needing to decorate it. Saying, this is me, all of me, even when it scares the hell out of you. That's what the next phase of this journey felt like, a quiet reckoning, a realization that healing isn't about escaping the shadow, but inviting it to sit beside you without letting it take the wheel. And I'll be honest, that's harder than it sounds, because sometimes I still get caught off guard. A conversation triggers something old. A tone of voice brings back a memory I didn't know I was still carrying. A failure pokes at the part of me that still wonders if I'm enough. But now, instead of spiraling or shutting down, I pause. I breathe. I get curious. I ask myself, what's the story behind this feeling? And often, it's something I haven't yet given enough compassion. That's the thing about shadow work. It's not linear, it loops, it revisits. But each time it circles back, you meet it from a slightly higher place, a little more grounded, a little more equipped, a little more kind. And that kindness, it becomes your anchor. Not just toward yourself, but toward the people around you. Because once you've faced your own darkness and lived to tell the tale, you stop expecting others to be perfect. You stop needing them to perform. You start allowing people the grace to be human, complicated, messy, evolving, just like you. That changed how I showed up in relationships. I stopped trying to fix people, stopped trying to save them or carry what wasn't mine. I started listening more and advising less, holding space instead of holding control, and the connections that came from that, real, deep, honest, were nothing like what I had before. I used to think being close to someone meant being fused, enmeshed, always agreeable. But now I see that real intimacy begins where masks end, where you can say, here's where I hurt, here's what I'm afraid of, here's what I'm still working through, and the other person says, me too. That me too, it heals more than most advice ever could. But I also want to say this, there's grief in this process. Grief for the years you spent hiding, for the love you didn't know how to receive, for the voice you silenced, for the opportunities missed because you didn't believe you were worthy. That grief is real and necessary. You have to mourn the version of you that survived, so you can make room for the version that's ready to live. And living, truly living, means showing up whole, not perfect, not polished, but whole, with your scars and your softness, your wisdom and your wounds, your light and your shadow, standing side by side, not in conflict, but in balance. I think that's what Jung meant when he said, I'd rather be whole than good, because goodness, as we've been taught, is often just a performance. But wholeness, that's real, that's rooted, that's where freedom lives. So here I am now, not finished, but present, not flawless, but free. And that's everything. If you've made it this far in your own journey, I want you to know you're not alone. This path isn't easy, but it's honest. And that honesty has the power to rebuild you from the inside out. Keep going. You're closer to yourself than you've ever been. You know what the most surprising part of all this has been? It's not the pain I had to face, or the memories I had to unearth, or even the shame I had to unravel. It's this deep, quiet sense of peace that's begun to settle inside me. Not because everything's perfect now, but because I've stopped trying to be. I used to think inner peace would come after I'd fixed everything, healed all the wounds, silenced all the doubts, erased all the fear. But real peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from making space for life to be what it is. Messy, unpredictable, tender, wild. And that includes making space for yourself. The whole self. That's what this work has given me. Not a new personality, not a shiny new identity, but a sense of wholeness, of belonging to myself. I can sit in silence now and not feel the urge to fill it. I can feel sadness without labeling it as weakness. I can witness my anger and ask what it needs, rather than suppressing or acting out. It's not that the shadow disappears, it doesn't. But it softens, it shifts. It becomes a partner, not a threat, a teacher, not a monster. And when you stop fighting it, you reclaim so much energy. Energy that can be used for joy, for creation, for connection. That's the part no one talks about enough. The joy on the other side of the pain. There's this aliveness that returns when you stop running from yourself. You notice beauty in places you used to overlook. You laugh more easily. You cry without shame. You become real. And realness is magnetic. It draws in people and experiences that are aligned with your truth, not your mask. But this work isn't just for us as individuals. The more I heal, the more I see how desperately the world needs healing too. Not just in systems and structures, though, yes, that too, but in the collective soul. The fear, the division, the hatred we see around us, they're all symptoms of unacknowledged shadow. We're projecting our disowned pain onto each other, and the only way out is in. So we have a choice, each of us, to keep repeating the patterns, or to pause, to turn inward, to meet the dark not with judgment, but with presence. Because every time we do that, even in a small way, we shift something in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, and eventually in the world. I know that might sound idealistic, but I've seen it, I've felt it, and I believe in it deeply. This isn't the end of the journey, it's just another beginning, because becoming whole isn't a destination. It's a practice, a commitment, a way of living. But now I no longer dread the dark. I walk into it with open eyes, open hands, and an open heart. And if I could offer you one final thought, it would be this. You are not broken. You never were. You are simply becoming who you've always been, beneath the fear, the shame, the silence. Keep going, keep listening, keep choosing truth over comfort, because the light you're searching for isn't out there, it's in you. Always has been.